Tears streamed down Temperance Hayes' face as she collapsed to her knees among the withering cornstalks. The September sun of 1876 beating down on her black mourning dress. 3 months a widow, and now this her entire crop failing before her eyes, the drought having finally won its battle against her desperate irrigation attempts. Thomas, she whispered her late husband's name to the dust-filled air, clutching a dried corn husk in her trembling hands. I cannot do this alone. The small Nebraska homestead that had been their dream now seemed a cruel joke. At 26, Temperance found herself alone with 40 acres of dying crops, dwindling supplies, and winter approaching with merciless certainty. Her slender frame shook with sobs as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. The bank would take everything soon. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. Startled, she looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a tall figure on horseback at the edge of her cornfield. The man dismounted with fluid grace, his movements suggesting a lifetime in the saddle. "Madam," his voice was deep but gentle. "Are you hurt?" Temperance hastily wiped her tears, embarrassment flooding her as she realized how she must appear kneeling in the dirt, face streaked with tears and dust. "I'm fine," she lied, struggling to rise on wobbly legs. Before she could fall again, strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her with surprising gentleness. Looking up, she found herself staring into eyes the color of a summer sky set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Pardon my intrusion, madam. Name's Ryker Jenkins. I'm foreman at the Double R Ranch over yonder." He gestured vaguely westward. "Saw you from the road and thought there might be trouble." Temperance stepped back, regaining her composure. "Temperance Hayes, this was my husband's farm." Ryker's eyes took in the failing cornfield, understanding dawning in his expression. "The drought's been hard on everyone this year." "It's been harder on some than others," she replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. His gaze moved from the withered crops to the small farmhouse in the distance, noting the sagging porch and missing roof shingles. Then back to her face, taking in the dark circles under her eyes and the way her mourning dress hung loose on her frame. "When did you lose him?" Ryker asked quietly. 3 months ago, fever took him." Temperance straightened her shoulders. "I should return to my chores. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Jenkins." Ryker removed his hat, revealing thick sandy brown hair. "Mrs. Hayes, forgive my forwardness, but it looks like you could use some help. I've got some experience with dry farming techniques that might save part of your crop." Temperance bristled. "I don't accept charity, Mr. Jenkins." A small smile touched his lips. "It's not charity I'm offering, madam. It's neighborly assistance. Besides, I know what it's like to work land that doesn't want to give." Something in his tone made her pause. There was no pity in his eyes, only understanding. Still, pride warred with desperation in her heart. "I can pay you when the harvest comes in," she finally said, not meeting his gaze. "If the harvest comes in," he corrected gently. "But I believe it will with the right methods, and we can discuss payment after we see results." Against her better judgment, Temperance nodded. "I suppose I could use some advice." The relief in Ryker's smile was unexpected. "Let me tie up my horse and we can walk your fields. I'd like to see what we're dealing with." For the next 2 hours, they walked the cornfields together, Ryker explaining moisture-preserving techniques she'd never heard of. He spoke of mulching methods used in drier regions and ways to direct what little rainwater might come. His knowledge was impressive, his manner respectful. "Where did you learn all this?" Temperance asked as they reached the edge of the field. 5 years in Arizona Territory before coming to Nebraska," he replied. "You learn to respect every drop of water when there's almost none to be had." By sunset, they had formulated a plan to save at least a portion of her corn. It wouldn't be the bountiful harvest Thomas had dreamed of, but it might be enough to keep the bank at bay. "I'll return tomorrow with some tools and hands from the ranch," Ryker said as he mounted his horse. "If we work quickly, we can implement these methods before the next hot spell." "Mr. Jenkins," Temperance called as he turned to leave. "Why are you doing this?" Ryker looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Because someone once did the same for me, Mrs. Hayes. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." True to his word, Ryker arrived the next morning with 4 ranch hands and a wagon loaded with tools. They worked from dawn until dusk, creating irrigation channels and applying mulching techniques to the most promising sections of the cornfield. Temperance worked alongside them, ignoring the ache in her muscles and the blisters forming on her palms. She caught Ryker watching her occasionally, an expression of admiration briefly crossing his features before he returned to his instructions. "You're stronger than you look, Mrs. Hayes," he commented during a brief water break. "Necessity breeds strength, Mr. Jenkins," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "And please call me Temperance. Mrs. Hayes makes me feel like I should be serving tea instead of digging trenches." His laugh was unexpected and warm. "Then I'm Ryker to you, Temperance." Over the following weeks, Ryker came daily, sometimes with help, sometimes alone. Together they fought against nature's cruelty, salvaging what they could of the corn crop. During their work, Temperance learned that Ryker had come to Nebraska after losing his small Arizona ranch to drought, starting over as a foreman rather than an owner. "It's not the same as having your own land," he admitted one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "But Mr. Richardson is a fair employer, and I've been saving to try again someday." "Is that why you're helping me?" "To practice for your next attempt," she asked, only half joking. Ryker was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe at first," he finally said. "But now I'm helping because I admire your determination. Most widows would have sold and moved to town by now." "This land was Thomas's dream," she said softly. "I can't abandon it without a fight. And that's why you'll succeed where others would fail." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Temperance looked away first, suddenly conscious of her wind-blown hair and dirt-stained dress. "It's getting late," she said, rising from her chair. "You should head back before it gets too dark." Ryker nodded, placing his hat on his head. "I'll return in 2 days. Got ranch business tomorrow." As October arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and mercifully a few light rains, it became clear their efforts had made a difference. Nearly a third of Temperance's crop showed signs of recovery, the stalks standing taller and the ears filling out with kernels. "We might get a decent yield after all," Ryker observed as they inspected the fields. "Not what you hoped for, but enough to get you through winter and have seed for next year." Temperance felt hope blossom in her chest for the first time since Thomas's death. "I couldn't have done it without your help. You would have found a way," he insisted. "You're resourceful." "Perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." The admission cost her something, acknowledging her need for help after months of fierce independence. Ryker seemed to understand the significance of her words. No one should have to face such hardship alone. Temperance. That evening, she invited him to stay for dinner, a simple meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. It was the first time they'd shared a meal inside her home rather than quick bites in the fields. The domesticity of it felt strange yet comforting. "This is delicious," Ryker said, savoring the stew. "I've been living on ranch cook fare so long I'd forgotten what a home-cooked meal tastes like." "It's nothing fancy," Temperance demurred, secretly pleased by his appreciation. "The best meals rarely are." He glanced around her small but tidy kitchen. "You've made this place warm despite everything." Temperance followed his gaze around the room, the curtains she'd sewn from flour sacks, the pressed wildflowers in a frame, the small collection of books on a shelf. Small touches of beauty amidst hardship. "I try to find moments of joy where I can," she admitted. "Thomas always said that was my gift, finding beauty in difficult places." He was right. Ryker's eyes met hers across the table. "It's a rare quality." The air between them seemed to shift, charged with something Temperance wasn't ready to acknowledge. She stood abruptly, gathering their empty bowls. "Would you like coffee before you go?" Ryker sensed her retreat and respected it. Another time, perhaps, I should get back to the ranch before full dark. At the door, he paused. The Harvest Festival is happening in town next weekend. Would you consider attending? The whole community will be there, and it might be good for you to connect with other farmers. Temperance hesitated. She hadn't been to town since Thomas's funeral, avoiding the pitying looks and whispered conversations that followed a young widow. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted. You wouldn't have to go alone. Ryker's offer hung in the air between them. Just as neighbors, of course, he added hastily. Temperance surprised herself by nodding. All right, as neighbors. The Harvest Festival transformed the small town of Pine Creek. Main Street was decorated with corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful bunting. Tables lined the thoroughfare, laden with food brought by families from miles around. A small band played lively tunes, and children darted between adults, their laughter floating on the crisp autumn air. Ryker met Temperance at the edge of town, as promised. He traded his work clothes for a clean shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed somewhat for the occasion. His eyes widened appreciably when he saw her approaching in a dark blue dress, not her morning black, for the first time since Thomas's death. You look lovely, he said simply. Temperance felt a blush warm her cheeks. Thank you. It felt time for a change. Together they wandered through the festival, stopping to speak with neighbors and townsfolk. Temperance noticed the curious glances cast their way, but found she minded less than expected with Ryker beside her. The banker, Mr. Farnsworth, approached them near the cider press. Mrs. Hayes, he greeted, tipping his hat. Good to see you in town. I've been meaning to ride out to discuss your loan situation. Temperance stiffened. I'll have a payment for you after harvest, Mr. Farnsworth, as we discussed. The banker's skeptical expression made her stomach clench with anxiety. Actually, Ryker interjected smoothly, Mrs. Hayes's crop is coming in remarkably well considering the drought. She's implemented some innovative techniques that have salvaged a substantial portion. Farnsworth's eyebrows rose. Is that so? Well, I look forward to seeing the results. And who might you be, sir? Ryker Jenkins, foreman at the Double R. Recognition dawned in the banker's eyes. Ah, Jenkins, Richardson speaks highly of you. His gaze shifted between them, speculation evident. Well, Mrs. Hayes, I'll expect you at the bank after your harvest is in. As he walked away, Temperance released a shaky breath. Thank you. He's been like a vulture circling since Thomas died. Ryker's expression darkened. Men like that profit from others' misfortunes. But he won't get your land, Temperance. Not if I can help it. The conviction in his voice warmed her more than the autumn sunshine. They continued through the festival, stopping to watch the children's sack races and sampling pies from the baking contest. For a few precious hours, Temperance felt the weight of her grief and worry lift from her shoulders. As evening approached, lanterns were lit, and the band struck up a waltz. Couples moved to the cleared area in front of the bandstand, swaying to the music. Would you care to dance? Ryker asked tentatively. Temperance hesitated. Dancing seemed a step further than she was prepared to go, an acknowledgement of moving forward that felt almost like betrayal. I understand if it's too soon, Ryker said, reading her hesitation. No, Temperance surprised herself by saying. I think I'd like that. His hand was warm at her waist as they joined the other dancers. Temperance couldn't remember the last time she'd been held, even in something as innocent as a dance. The realization brought a lump to her throat. Are you all right? Ryker asked, concern in his eyes. Yes, she whispered. Just remembering how to do this. We can remember together, he said softly, and she knew he wasn't just talking about dancing. Under the stars and lantern light, Temperance felt something long dormant begin to stir within her heart. Not replacing what was lost, but creating something new alongside the memory of what had been. When he escorted her home that night, they rode in comfortable silence, the events of the day settling between them like a shared secret. At her door, Ryker took her hand, his touch gentle. Thank you for coming today. It was an honor to escort you. "Thank you for convincing me to go," she replied. "It was healing in a way I didn't expect," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Good night, Temperance. Good night, Ryker." As October waned, they worked side by side to bring in the harvest. What they salvaged wasn't abundant, but it was enough to keep the farm, enough to plant again in spring, enough to sustain her through winter. On the final day of harvest, as they loaded the last wagon of corn, Temperance surveyed the now empty field with mixed emotions. Pride in what they'd accomplished against the odds, gratitude for Ryker's help, and underneath it all, a bittersweet acknowledgement that this chapter was ending. "What will you do now?" she asked as they walked back to the farmhouse in the gathering dusk. "Head back to my regular duties at the Double R," Ryker replied. "Winter's coming and there's much to prepare." Temperance nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling his words created. She'd grown accustomed to his presence, his quiet strength, his gentle humor. "I can't begin to thank you properly for all you've done," she said, stopping at her porch steps. Ryker removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Temperance, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "I helped because I wanted to, because you deserved it, because you fought when others would have surrendered. Still, I'm grateful." "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "Something I should have mentioned earlier." Temperance felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What is it?" "I knew Thomas. Not well, but we'd met in town several times. He spoke of you often with such pride and love." Ryker's eyes held her steadily. "The last time I saw him, about a week before he fell ill, he mentioned concerns about the farm's mortgage and the coming drought. He asked if I knew any dry farming techniques that might help." Temperance stared at him, piecing together what he was saying. "You came here because of a promise to Thomas?" "No," Ryker said firmly. "I came because I saw you in that cornfield and I couldn't ride past. But yes, I remembered Thomas, and perhaps that made me more determined to help." She turned away, emotions warring within her. "You should have told me." "I know." He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "At first, it didn't seem important. Then, as time passed, I worried you might think my motives weren't genuine." "And what are your motives, Ryker?" she asked, facing him again, her voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, he was silent, his eyes searching hers. "They changed," he finally said. "What began as neighborly help became something else entirely. I care for you, Temperance. More than I should, perhaps, given your circumstances." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Temperance felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "I don't know if I can be what you deserve." Ryker nodded, acceptance in his gaze. "I understand. And I would never ask you to be anything other than who you are, grieving and healing at your own pace." He placed his hat back on his head and took a step back. "I'll check on you periodically through winter, make sure you have what you need. As a friend, nothing more." Temperance watched him walk to his horse, feeling as though something precious was slipping away. "Ryker," she called impulsively. He turned, hope carefully contained in his expression. "Will you come for Sunday dinner? Next week?" The invitation surprised even her. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I'd be honored." Winter descended on the Nebraska plains with unforgiving intensity. Snow piled in drifts against Temperance's farmhouse, and the wind howled across the empty fields. But inside, a different kind of warmth began to grow. True to his word, Ryker visited regularly, first just for Sunday dinners, then more frequently as the harshest weather made travel difficult. He brought supplies, news from town, and most importantly, companionship that gradually became essential to them both. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Temperance spoke of Thomas, of their love and their dreams for the farm. Ryker told her of his failed ranch in Arizona, of lessons learned through hardship, of his desire to try again someday. "What would you do differently?" she asked one snowy evening as they sat side by side, the fire casting flickering shadows across the room. "Build more slowly. Plan for the worst while hoping for the best." He glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Not try to do it alone. The meaning behind his words wasn't lost on her. Is that what you want, to start again? Yes, he admitted. But not just anywhere. Here in this community that's become home. As January turned to February and February to March, something beautiful and fragile blossomed between them. A touch that lingered longer than necessary, glances that held new meaning, conversations that stretched into the night. On the first truly warm day of spring, Ryker arrived with a wagon full of seedlings and a proposal. "I've been thinking," he began as they walked the thawing fields together, "about this year's planting. I've been planning to use the corn seed I saved," Temperance said. "Yes, but have you considered diversifying? Corn, yes, but also wheat and perhaps vegetables closer to the house." His eyes were alight with enthusiasm. "The soil here has potential for more than just corn." Temperance smiled at his excitement. "That sounds ambitious for one woman alone." Ryker stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "That's part of what I wanted to discuss. You wouldn't be alone." Her heart quickened. "What are you suggesting?" "A partnership of sorts." He took a deep breath. "I've saved enough to buy a small parcel of land, but I've been thinking that perhaps combining resources would benefit us both." "A business arrangement?" Temperance asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It could start that way," Ryker said slowly. "But Temperance, I need to be honest. My feelings for you have only grown stronger these past months. I know it might still be too soon, but I can't imagine a future that doesn't include you." Temperance looked out across her land, the land that had been Thomas's dream, but had become hers through struggle and determination. Then back at Ryker, who had stood beside her through the darkest days without asking for anything in return. "I loved Thomas with all my heart," she said softly. "I always will." "I would never ask you to forget him," Ryker replied. "He's part of who you are. But I've learned that the heart has room for new love alongside memories of the old." She took a step closer to him. "I care for you, Ryker, more than I thought possible when we met." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to consider your partnership proposal in all its forms." Her smile was tentative but genuine. "But let's start with this year's planting and see where it leads us." The joy that spread across Ryker's face made her heart swell. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, he leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her lips. It was brief and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. "I can work with that," he whispered. Spring brought new life to the Hayes farm. Under Temperance and Ryker's combined efforts, fields that had struggled the previous year now flourished with diverse crops. They worked side by side, their partnership extending beyond the fields as their feelings for each other deepened with each passing day. By midsummer, Ryker had moved into the small cabin at the edge of Temperance's property, close enough to help with daily chores, but maintaining propriety in the eyes of their neighbors. Those neighbors, who had once whispered about the widow and the ranch foreman, now nodded approvingly at the revitalized farm and Temperance's brightened spirits. On a warm August evening, exactly 1 year after Ryker had first found Temperance crying in her failing cornfield, he asked her to walk with him to that same spot. The corn now stood tall and healthy, tassels waving in the gentle breeze. "Remember how it looked last year?" he asked, surveying the thriving crop. "How could I forget? I was certain all was lost." Temperance's hand found his, a gesture that had become natural between them. "That day changed my life," Ryker said, turning to face her. "Seeing you here, so determined even in your grief. I knew you were extraordinary." Temperance smiled, touching his cheek gently. "I believe it was you who lifted me up when I fell, both literally and figuratively. And I'd do it again, every day for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me." From his pocket, Ryker withdrew a simple gold band. "Temperance Hayes, I love you with all that I am. Will you marry me and build our future together on this land?" Tears filled Temperance's eyes, but unlike the tears shed in this same field a year ago, these were born of joy rather than despair. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Ryker Jenkins." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Ryker's voice was thick with emotion. I promise you harvests together for as many seasons as were granted, not just corn and wheat, but joy and family and love." Their kiss, surrounded by the fruits of their shared labor, sealed a promise born in hardship and nurtured through healing. When they finally broke apart, Temperance rested her head against Ryker's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "You think Thomas would approve?" she asked softly. Ryker's arms tightened around her. "I believe he would want you to be loved and the farm to thrive. Both are happening, so yes, I think he would." They were married that October, after the harvest was safely in a bountiful one that secured their financial future and confirmed the wisdom of their partnership. The small church in Pine Creek overflowed with well-wishers as they exchanged vows. Temperance in a dress of deep blue rather than traditional white, acknowledging her journey through grief to this new beginning. 2 years later, the Jenkins farm, for they had taken Ryker's name while keeping the Hayes legacy alive in their hearts, had become one of the most prosperous in the county. Their innovative farming methods attracted attention from neighboring farms, and Ryker often shared his knowledge freely, remembering his own struggles. On a September afternoon much like the one when they first met, Temperance walked through the cornfield with her infant daughter cradled in her arms. The little girl, named Hope, had her mother's dark hair and her father's sky-blue eyes. "Your father will be home soon," Temperance told her drowsy daughter. "He's been helping Mr. Peterson with his irrigation system." As if summoned by her words, Ryker appeared at the edge of the field, his face lighting up at the sight of his wife and child. He crossed to them quickly, placing a kiss on Temperance's lips before gently taking Hope into his arms. "How are my girls today?" he asked, his voice soft as he gazed at his daughter's face. "We're wonderful," Temperance replied, leaning against his side. "Just walking through the fields counting our blessings." Ryker looked around at the abundant crop, then down at the child in his arms and finally at the woman beside him. "I never dreamed I could be this fortunate," he admitted. "Nor I," Temperance agreed. "Especially not on that day you found me crying here. Best day of my life," Ryker said with conviction, though I didn't know it at the time. Together they walked back toward their home, the setting sun casting long shadows across fields that had once known only hardship, but now flourished with promise. Behind them, the corn stood tall and golden, a testament to perseverance, partnership, and the unexpected harvests that life sometimes yields from the most barren ground. As they reached their porch, Temperance paused, looking back at the distance they had traveled not just across the field but through grief and healing, doubt and certainty, loneliness and love. "Thank you for stopping that day," she said simply. Ryker's free arm encircled her waist, drawing her close as Hope slumbered against his chest. "Thank you for letting me stay." In the gentle Nebraska twilight, their silhouettes merged into one as they entered their home together, the door closing softly behind them on a harvest richer than either could have imagined.